welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon or evening for some. We really appreciate it. This is a conversation we're going to have as part of Seldor's Investment Series. It's a series of conversations with founders and investors. Today, we'll have the honor of speaking with Miguel Ayala, CEO of Aphelion Aerospace, and Ben West, co-founder and CEO of the Mercury Group. I would just like to start out by asking both of them to quickly introduce themselves. I won't spoil much here with my own knowledge of the both. So if I could start with you, Miguel, if you could just tell us a bit about yourself, how you came to be the CEO of Aphelion Aerospace.
Well, I've been in the aerospace industry my entire career, and that's 20 plus years building rockets and missiles and satellites and space stations for big and notable companies like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Honeywell, SpaceX, ULA, and so throughout my career, after becoming very familiar with what I was doing, I thought, well, there must be a way to do things faster, cheaper, better. So then, I started exploring different ideas, different options. And by the time I joined SpaceX, I was already pretty much thinking, this is great. I'm glad that we're doing something different here. And then after some more years in the industry, I was thinking, there's we can do even better than this. We can do different things, and that's when I joined. When I co-founded Exodus Space, a former startup that was developing fully reusable space planes, two-stage to-orbit space planes, and then we, because of the pandemic and because of some family car injury that set me back a little bit. I was thinking, well, the timing is not right. Let's try something else. And I was thinking, well, what could we do for Exodus to move faster? And at the time, we intended to develop this non-toxic, non-cryogenic propulsion technology anyway for the space plane. And then I was thinking, maybe there's somebody else already did this. And as a customer, I reached out to Aphelion Orbitals, to Matthew Travis, one of the original founders of Aphelion Orbitals, and they had already developed this non-toxic, non-cryogenic propulsion technology that I could use for my space plane. And then I thought, well, that's great. This is awesome. And then I reached out to Matthew back in 2020, and after some more conversations, we decided to join forces. so I joined Aphelion. Yes, I joined Aphelion Aerospace then after the original company. Now it became Aphelion Aerospace, and I started as COO, and then months later we swapped roles, and here I am, CEO of Aphelion Aerospace.
Great. And when was that, Miguel, that you joined Aphelion Aerospace? When did you guys join forces?
So we started talking in the summer of 2020, during the as the pandemic was starting to become more of a thing that may stick around for a while. So then after a few months, in December of 2020, that's when I officially joined the company. And then by April of 2021, I became the CEO.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Now, you, Ben, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
So another lifetime, years ago, I was in the Air Force. Did a couple tours. Got out of there and said, there's got to be a better way to make money than dodging mortars. So I went into finance, did pretty well in finance, retired from that a few years ago. And in the intervening years, I've been, do a lot of therapy on myself, but in addition to that, investing in some private market issues like Miguel. And then specifically, within space, I started to see there's this enormous opportunity between what's happening in the industry and I think the perspective of what's happening in the industry outside of it. Because I certainly held that myself until I dug in and really started to talk to Miguel. And then he, so graciously opened the doors for me to really embrace the space industry. And then given my aerospace background, it seemed to be a pretty natural fit. and so to that end, I'm actually trying to start my own investment bank to bring more traditional sources of capital, to the space industry, kind of move away from the VC and or government, NASA, DoD type of contracts, and see if we can mature that industry as its own entity. So maybe that's a big I don't know, that may be an enormous goal that's kind of Sisyphean maybe, but yeah,
I think that's an industry that's used to big things, big dreams, and big aspirations.
Very much so, yeah.
And great. And what's the story? How did you guys, for the audience, just so you understand? So Aphelion is a Seldor Capital portfolio company, and Ben has, through the Mercury Group, which his co-founder and CEO, made an investment into Aphelion. So how did that, that happen? How did you guys get to know each other, and what was the process there, Ben, from getting to know Miguel at first and deciding to make that investment?
Sure. To be quite frank, I don't remember who contacted who. Likely, I think Miguel may have reached out to me. I think I had put like investor on my LinkedIn profile at one point or something. Something as innocuous as that. Got an email, but right away I was like, yeah, rockets, space, satellites, sure, dude. I'll talk to you. This sounds incredible. And so once we got on the phone, and I hope as will come across the audience, Miguel is just a great human being first and foremost.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so that would, to me, it's just been easy conversations between two guys who are interested, passionate, and have some competency. And then once I realized the product that they've developed, the propulsion system, their entire launch service, and met with Matthew, then I understood really the market opportunity perhaps that they were facing, and more importantly to me, some of the stuff that's relevant to this conversation, the sustainability piece, the greener piece, right? So I don't want to spoil the propulsion, Miguel. So I'll let you
take
it from
there. Go for it. No, go for it.
Well, so yeah, to me, it's if I can just blush for a bit or brag for a bit. To me, so as an F-16 mechanic, we, there's their emergency power units use hydrazine. So it's a highly toxic chemical, but it works every time it fires. It's extraordinarily reliable, but it's hard to develop. It's only, I think, and again, Miguel, clear me up here where I mistake, but the DoD sells it to itself, like you can't even buy it. It's so toxic. I know when we were in the Air Force, any exposure to it was grounds for like immediate medical discharge, or at least, a serious medical evaluation anyway. And millions of dollars of recovery equipment, handling, training, MSDS training for the whole base, et cetera. So once Miguel kind of clued me in to say, well, we may be able to replace that and do it in a way that it's mostly water vapor comes out when it's done, I was like, yeah, how much? What can I do? Where, what else what do you need? So that's kind of how, that relationship formed. And again, just I think because of his genuineness, it's opening all these other doors for me. And then hopefully, I'm able to do the same for Miguel. But yeah, it's been a pretty fun. We only met in February, maybe. So
yeah,
it's been a pretty fun ride.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
And I think it's a perfect segue. And then Miguel, if you could just tell us and the audience, and for the non-technicals, just like me, what it is that Aphelion is doing and offering that's new, especially in relation to your green propulsion solutions and those aspects.
So this propulsion technology that we have already developed is so it's green, it's non-toxic, non-cryogenic, and what's awesome about it is that it's applicable for launch, for rocket launch, and for spacecraft in space. And there is some modification required, but it's not much. And that's something that is just not common in the industry at all. Rockets are powered with a certain type of chemical propellants, and then spacecraft they use something different. And then On top of that, like Ben was mentioning, the current chemicals that are used to power rockets and spacecraft, they're either cryogenic, like super cold, or toxic, highly hazardous to the human body and environment. And well, our propellants or chemicals, they're carbon neutral, like the stuff is carbon neutral. Even the raw materials, they're all very clean. They're easy to handle. They're not poisonous to the human body. They are flammable. You do have to be careful. It's like gasoline, right? Just don't
I
smoke.
think that's an important aspect, right?
Yes, that's good to
If
clarify.
it wasn't flammable, you'd have a bigger problem.
Yeah, so it's like gasoline. You shouldn't, just because it's safe to handle, you shouldn't drink it, right? so it's kind of like that. Like it's as easy to handle as gasoline, but it's flammable. So
Okay.
so that's and the thing, and how this benefits the industry, how this benefits everybody, is that well, not only is it green and it's good for the environment, because of that very reason, it helps us go through the manufacturing and launch operations, the whole handling process, so much faster. It's so much faster and so much cheaper, because to handle the current chemicals like cryogenics, there's there's a process. You have to have complex equipment on the ground. You can't fuel the rocket, like 24 hours in advance and just let it sit there with cryogenics. It's doable, but you're going to be venting a lot of that fuel.
Sorry, just for the audience, Miguel, when you speak of cryogenics, what does that mean?
Oh, so they are super cold. They have to be maintained at near absolute zero temperature, and to remain liquid. As soon as they reach as soon as they reach a certain temperature, they turn to gas, and they're no longer easily manageable. They become explosives, highly volatile.
One of the things that was also very exciting about Miguel's technology is, because it doesn't require all that other environmental consideration, the availability to launch becomes much more ubiquitous or widely available. And I think his customer base reflects that. A variety of countries, South American, South Africa, or African. I don't, and even in maybe Scotland or something. I don't know if I'm sharing too much here, but I think that's to me, that's one of the most exciting parts is democratization of that access. So I'll shut up now so we can watch the movie. Sorry.
There you go. So this was from April this year, right?
Yes. So that's our engine right there, and let's see. So there it is. That's our engine firing, and all this flame that you see coming up. So that's only happening because down at the bottom, the gate wasn't open. This is what is happening on actual launch. So you can see the plume right there that the rocket is, the engine is exhausting, and like all of that. Like the only reason why you don't see anybody there is because the noise and the heat would be dangerous to the human body, but the actual exhaust, the chemicals coming out, they are mostly water, so they're not dangerous to the environment. And here, the only reason why they are wearing those suits is just for added precautions. It's not that's actually not necessary.
Okay, gotcha. And I think there's a couple of questions here, but I think if it's right now about the IP, for your green fuel, if you could tell us a bit about it.
Yes, so the propulsion technology is proprietary of Aphelion Aerospace. We are currently in the process of filing a provisional patent as a step for a permanent global patent.
as the R&D continues at Aphelion, will there be other patents? Are there other
Yes.
applications? Like, you know, what other sort of protected value are you guys able to get out of there, other
That's
than
a
just
good,
this one propellant?
yeah, that's a good question. Yes. So we have we are licensing multiple technologies from NASA and from DoD to fast track our overall business growth. There's a lot of technology that has already been developed by NASA, by DoD. That's just sitting there waiting for somebody to use it, and we're doing that. And so that's all that we're licensing. Also, there along the process, there are many technologies that we're also developing just as a byproduct, and there are many opportunities for locking down many more patents. For example, our CubeSat IP. That's a lot of the CubeSat architecture that we have right now is proprietary. As we go through the process, we find different ways of doing things, and you know, if we can make it better, cheaper, might as well, you know, protect it.
Miguel, as part of, you know, of your business model, do you intend to license or to provide parts of your technology to different space companies? Is that part of the strategy at all at this point?
So we've been thinking about that actually. We essentially have three verticals, and we can sell them separately or bundled. So we have our CubeSats that we can provide as kits for the customer, and they can build them, and they can add their payloads to these CubeSats, or we can build it for them. So we have our CubeSat IP. Then there's the propulsion, and the propulsion is applicable for launch and for spacecraft. So when it comes to propulsion, we do intend to start selling propulsion systems to satellite to companies that are building satellites and moon landers. And just so happens right now, I'm happy to say that we are. Let me just say that we are looking really good on being able to provide a complete moon lander propulsion system. And that's it's a great opportunity for us. Since the technology is pretty mature now, more customers are becoming more comfortable with what we're doing, especially after last month's test. That was like the final icing on the cake of our development.
Yeah.
And then there's the launch. On the launch side, we'll provide services, and so that's where we are at this point. In the future, it may be possible for us to license out our technologies. We'll see about that.
Okay. And we saw recently in the press that you've had some, you know, some major breakthroughs with different contracts being signed. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Oh, sure. So we just got a contract last month for up to $10 million to provide the CubeSat products to this global STEM project. Basically, it starts with providing these CubeSat simulator kits for high school and university students to build them. And then next year, we'll provide CubeSat simulator kits, and also CubeSats that can be launched with high altitude balloons, and then built and operated by the students. And then also in the following year, we'll be able to provide CubeSat simulator kits, CubeSat kits that are launched with balloons, and also CubeSats that go to space. And so year after year, this contract, or the revenue coming from that contract, will get bigger and bigger. Okay.
And obviously, you can't just mention that you're going to be working on providing technology to the Lunar Lander without me asking you a bit more. So to the extent that you can disclose, what is that all about, and what's Aphelion's part in it?
So we would be the primary provider for the entire moon lander propulsion system. This includes the main propulsion, and for the main propulsion, we're going to be providing. We're going to be just coming up with a different size of our bipropellant rocket engine, and then will also be providing thrusters and the propulsion system for attitude control. So it's the complete propulsion solution for moon landers. And one last thing that I wanted to add about this is that When it comes to lunar applications, our propellants are actually a great candidate for in situ research utilization because our oxidizer can be produced on the moon.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's a big chunk of the propulsion system.
Yeah, very important. If I could turn to you, Ben, a bit and
Yeah.
just ask you, from an investor's perspective, how important is it, the green aspect of Aphelion and Miguel's technology?
Great question. And I actually intuited the answer, but I did some research yesterday and called actually two people who may be in the audience, I'm not sure about, are DEI experts and ESG and for a big investment house. So I ended up speaking with them, and one of the things that they sort of highlighted to me was, again, and Alan, we were mentioning before everybody came on, the Army has finally released their climate change plan. They're decarbonizing. The Space Force is probably going to follow suit. The Air Force will follow suit. The European Union has been trying to move away from these fuels for, again, that's more of a point for Miguel, but for years, right? And they continually have to bump out their own timelines. But I think we're facing a point now where the customer demand is going to be absolutely, it has to be sustainable or it is not acceptable, right? Like the 20 to 40-year-olds today that are going to be making all those big business decisions in the future, they don't even want to hear about that unless it's, unless it's healthy for everybody in general. And I think, what's even cooler is that actually makes the business case to start where Miguel is, not retrofit your operation backwards, right? So again, if the Army, a lot of cons to working with the government contracts, but some of the pros are they'll probably force you to measure these things. They probably won't just let you get away with going, yeah, we didn't put any carbon in, and so now you have to go back through your whole supply chain and install measuring devices or people or requirements, or if you're a hydrazine rocket, I don't even, again, clear me up, Miguel. I think SpaceX had trouble in Texas because of some of their environmental studies. They weren't satisfactory to the locals, and I may be misunderstanding that, but so I think there's a business case at this point that it's not nice to have, it's necessary. And I think even further, and I hope Miguel can touch on this as well, in this particular case, it's a hell of a lot cheaper on top of all of that too. So it's like a win-win-win.
Awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so when it comes to setting up launch facilities around the world, and right now, because of the growth of the space industry, many countries are looking at setting up their own launch capabilities. Well, that's not easy at all. Even in Texas. Texas is like one of the most business-friendly states in the country, and you could pretty much burn whatever you want in Texas. But you know what? Even in Texas, it took about 8 years to be able to launch rockets for SpaceX down in Brownsville. I was there at SpaceX when back in the early 2010s. We were looking at we wanted to launch in Texas in like 2 years. Yeah, right.
Right.
They haven't launched yet. Well, I guess they haven't tried a little bit, but yeah, it took 8 years to be able to launch out of Texas, and that was mainly because of environmental studies, environmental concerns.
And Miguel, what kind of feedback do you get on the business side, right? The business case that Ben mentioned when you talk about here's my green solution, and that sounds just great from an environmental perspective. But when you explain the business case, what kind of feedback are you getting?
From investors or from the customers?
From investors.
Okay, from the investors. So one of the biggest challenges that we face right now is because it's what's happening with the launch industry. The launch industry is perceived to be saturated and full of big players like SpaceX, and so we hear that launch is going to be commoditized and it's highly competitive and there's no room for new players. Well, at a glance, it does look like that. It is true. There are over 200 companies around the world that say that they're building rockets, and so when we hear that from investors, what we tell them is that well, the thing is that a lot of those companies, they're not real actually. Like a good 80% are like hobby projects or some defunct programs or some companies that are working on crazy technologies that have no commercial viability. And then out of you take those out, and then the rest are companies that are funded by billionaires. They're like hobby projects, even if they don't have a business case, because they're heavily funded, they're still around. And then other ones are heavily government subsidized, and that's the only way to survive. But when you look at and then the other thing is that because launch itself, I'll be honest with you guys, launch itself is not necessarily a great way to make profit. Just let's be honest, and that's why a lot of these launch companies right now, the leading launch companies like SpaceX, they're building big buses, like big commuter buses that carry like hundreds of CubeSats at a time to be able to build up enough profit margin. Now, what we tell them is, while that's happening, because we're building, because our rocket is so small, and because we're going after the taxi type service to space, and because we're using non-toxic, non-cryogenic propulsion, and because our operational costs are so low, we can be profitable, and that's the difference. So big rocket companies building big buses, and us building dedicated taxi service to space.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Miguel, I was trying to get Miguel to throw a number out that he's sometimes uncomfortable with, but because it sounds unbelievable, but there's like a 50x difference between the cost of 1 kilogram of his fuel and the cost of, say, the commercial hydrazine. Like 50x
Wow.
is an impressive, drastic reduction in those cost of goods sold, and they're better for everyone. Also,
Right.
so that
Understood.
it seems like a no-brainer, but so actually, Miguel, that leads me to ask you kind of who are your customers? I know you've got some LOI support, but if it's coming from a specific industry or customer type or a focus that you guys have pushed.
Okay, so right now we have LOIs worth up to $250 million, and that's coming for primarily launch services, and a big chunk of that is from a company that's building. This is cool. This is so cool. I want to work with them. They are building the capability to recycle space debris in orbit and reuse it.
Wow.
So that basically they're building floating foundries, and for that, what they like about us is that we're able to supply whatever their foundries need in space on demand, like all the time. A little bit here, a little bit there from different parts around the world. So we have a pretty major, pretty big LOI with them, and then other ones are like, for example, one of them is a space tug company. So like right now, when you launch with SpaceX, for example, you go to a certain place in orbit, but then from that place to go to different locations in orbit, or you go to higher orbits, you need that last mile service. So we have a partner company that's going to provide that that last mile service, but to go to geo, and even eventually for like lunar transfers. And so for them, they really like our capability, because with us they can launch to all the crazy orbits, like the Maya orbit, the Tundra orbit, different orbits that are not used right now. Leo is getting crowded, but the other orbits are not. So now, and then other ones are nano satellite companies that need launch services. And then we also have about $350 million in letters of support, and a big chunk of that is coming from a company that's building constellations of satellites, and they're looking for a propulsion system provider, and they want to go green because they're just now starting. I mean, actually, they already have several birds in the sky, but they are already using other green propellants. But what they've told us is that the current green propellant options have their drawbacks. So they definitely want to work with us. They see our potential. So that's a big chunk of that letter of support. And I'll stop right there. There's that's quite a bit.
Thank you.
That's great. And Miguel, what types of other partnerships, here on Earth that you may be looking for that would assist in bringing your green propellant to the market? For instance, one of our portfolio companies, Simvita, just got into this partnership with United to create a green aviation fuel. Do you see yourself in the future maybe going that route and trying to create things that might be used in different industries now?
Yes, well, in a way. So I did talk to the guys at Simvita, and you know what, man, I am excited to working with them because it turns out that with what they're doing, not only can we make like zero carbon propulsion, we can do carbon negative propulsion, which is amazing. And yeah, so that's going to be the next step. I'm sharing it now because we're in a Seldor audience, but yeah, we're definitely going to be pursuing that approach. And it seems like it's not too crazy in the future, and it's something that's doable with their help.
Okay. Ben, what, just switching gears a bit, just talking about really investment, what do you think are the major obstacles to attract more traditional investors to invest in space companies like Miguel's?
Yeah, it's a little difficult to say, but as an outsider, it seems like sometimes there's a misunderstanding from the investor perspective, one in terms of, let's just say, size, or it's all relative, right? So the whole industry is a couple $100 billion and growing. I mean, it's rapidly growing, but that's still somewhat small on a global scale. And I think what happens is the very intelligent people create very exciting technology, and they see 100 steps into the future, and they say those are just engineering problems. That's easy. Engineering we can do. But then they tell the investor, well, why are you going to Mars? What are you going to do when you're there? Oh, well, don't worry about it. Well, who's going to pay for it? Oh, the government has already got us. We got 10 million from them. But 10 million, how far is that going to get you? That probably wouldn't even get you out of orbit. I mean, so to me, there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect, as a lot of the technology is coming from places where they're secret on purpose, they're insular on purpose, they're, it's not well understood, right? Like how is this technology, Miguel, taken? What did the guy invented it in the 80s, right? How is it 40 years later that it's just now becoming a viable solution? And I think that's part of the problem. And I think that's kind of where some companies like yourself can really shine, is like you've already got customers that are outside of that window. You have demand from industry, from universities. You also have demand from the government, but it's not a dependence on DoD. It's not a dependence on NASA. And then it's not also just assuming that, oh, this is cool, people will be on board. And I think that's sadly, that is what SpaceX is projecting and Blue Origin is projecting into at least the public eye, maybe not the investment eye, but to the public eye, it looks like that's not a commercial endeavor. That's like the yachting, that's like Ted Turner doing his yachts in Manhattan, or, yacht racing. I mean, it's cool, sure, but not even close to applicable to anything in real life.
Sure.
But I don't think that's true anymore, right? And so I think that's why we're seeing this sort of demand now, and the launch services everybody's trying to build a launch company, like Miguel said, and maybe space race part 2, but it's a commercial space race.
Sure. And Miguel, how do you you bridge that gap. And I've heard you speaking publicly before about the challenge in communicating what it is that you do to both non-technical, even technical audiences when you're trying to explain the business case. So how at Aphelion you managed to do that, to secure your initial investments?
Yeah, that's a good question. So um, so on one side, we our technology is great and everything, and we can save a lot of money, but at the same time, it is not common here in the US. Our propellants, like our oxidizer, is very common in Russia. It's powered. It powers the thrusters for altitude control on the Soyuz rocket, the rocket with the longest history in the world. And then in the UK, it has a long history. But here in the US, it's not that commonly used. Some of the biggest aerospace houses in the country, like NASA and DoD, some of the researchers have unfortunately they had some bad luck with our oxidizer. So then our oxidizer started. It kind of like this goes back to the 60s. It 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 became like the stepchild that
Like the black sheep of the group.
yeah, it became the black sheep, right? Because there were some issues that they weren't able to work out back then, so they were like, "Oh, let's just forget this." so then, since the beginning of the space age, since the 50s and 60s, it almost became a dogma. It pretty much became a dogma to use cryogenics for launch and hydrazine for satellites and moon landers. That's all we know what to do here in the U.S. And then we use some people use some hybrid stuff. So we use solids for like for rocket boosters, things like that. But primarily for launch, cryogenics, for spacecraft, hydrogen. That's it. Um, and then so when we go back to that mentality and we say, hey guys, look, it's 2022. We can do this. This is cheaper. This is green, and you don't need a big bunny suit to handle it. And people think it's crazy. So there's some room left for us to kind of change to push that narrative and say, look, this is look we there has been 70, 60 years, 60 years have passed, or 70 years have passed since we stopped messing with this thing. A lot of work has been done, and
Right.
this is not something that we're starting with right now. It's actually, this technology is actually something that we continued from a research project that started at a national lab like 20 plus years ago, about 20 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So you're able to sort of, well, I remember in our case, you guys were able to clearly explain the technology, lay out your business plan, and it was just music to our ears. I think similar to what happened to Ben. And yeah, but and Miguel, you're raising funds right now. You're out there. Yeah. What it is that you're seeing in terms of challenges and opportunities in this process.
So for us, the biggest challenge is really, like I mentioned earlier, being able to quickly and succinctly tell the investors, communicate to the investors how we are different, even though we are in this presumably competitive launch market, and also more than anything, focus on the business side of it, like with the potential, the growth potential. Right now, we have. I don't know if you guys saw earlier, somebody just walked out. And that's because we were interviewing our person to help us with business development and sales, and that's because we actually have. I'm going to echo John's start from last week. Our customers are reaching out to us, and they're asking if we can provide them launch services, or we can provide spacecraft propulsion, and like it honestly, it didn't take that long for us to build up our LOI pool to 250 million. Yeah, the industry is looking for this. They want this. They don't want to deal with hydrazine or cryogenics, and companies that are building satellites in Brazil, for example, they don't want to ship their satellite all the way to Florida to launch on a SpaceX rocket, just so that their satellite can be removed from the rocket because maybe they have a hardware piece that's Chinese made, and then maybe there's another space satellite on that launch that's a government satellite, and they go, oh hell no, you're not putting Chinese stuff on here. so basically being able to launch from Brazil, that gives us the flexibility to service the Latin American market, for example, without having to deal with US regulations.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Very, very, very interesting.
I don't know if I answered your question there, but I kind of went a little sideways, but I'm sorry. I'm just excited about what we're doing.
It's all good. That's why this is interesting.
Miguel, will you just touch on quickly the opportunity, I think, in this round with Africa, with the continent of Africa? I mean, I think there's an enormous opportunity. Well, and South America, maybe in a similar vein. If you would just touch on that, right? Like as the inflection point of as launch costs have plummeted more or less, right now it's feasible for almost any country, certainly any university. So if you would just kind of talk about maybe the opportunity that is even wider.
Sure. So yeah, so the growth of the space industry as a whole, we think that it's actually vastly underestimated, because when it comes to space industry, we only focus on the big players like the US and some of the countries in Europe, not all, just a handful, and then China, Russia. But then there are two massive sleepy giants that have no industry, no space industry almost, and that is all of Latin America and all of Africa and even South Asia. So there's what I think is going to happen is that the space industry is going to experience the same type of growth as the internet industry, where back in the early days of the internet industry, the internet was first it was only a military thing, a government thing, and then it became popular in the big countries, and then it expanded all over the globe, and we see the same thing happening here in the when it comes to space, and then with us being able to launch from South America and from Africa and Australia, that'll give us the ability to service those regions, and also even the customers in Europe and the US that perhaps they would rather launch out of South America to be able to launch faster rather than waiting for an opportunity to be able to launch from Florida. Florida is getting a little crowded.
When you mentioned, South America and Africa, Miguel, I imagine, and we're not only talking about government clients, you also included different types of clients there, given your price point, right? So what types of customers would you have down there?
So we do have an LOI with a company in Brazil that's building a satellite, a nano satellite constellation to monitor the rainforest in Brazil, and also monitor crops, the agriculture industry. It's becoming, especially right now with climate change, especially in countries along the equator, they're very concerned about agriculture, about deforestation. So there are many companies like Peru, Ecuador, Brazil, and of course in Africa and Australia that are looking to launch satellites to space so they can better track climate change and all these different things. So so this company in Brazil, they've asked us to help them with satellite with their CubeSat assembly, integration, and launch. So that's one of the people that really benefit from the bundled service.
Okay. Do you think the price point will be such that, let's say, not so well-funded academic institutions or smaller companies, if they want to do research in space and send something up in space, especially in Latin America and Africa, parts of Asia, do you think your price point will be at a level that makes this technology accessible to these people?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yes. So the price point that we have on our pitch deck right now, it's our starting point. We're being a little conservative, partly because the industry is nowhere near like really cheap prices yet, and also we're just trying to play it safe, but there's a lot of room for improvement for us. So if the fewer legal and safety hurdles we have to go through, the cheaper will be, because a lot of the cost goes to the process more. I mean, the legal and all of that instead
On the
of
compliance.
exactly.
Can you touch
Yeah.
on, Miguel, how that just adds also to the launch cycle? So I think
Yeah.
something that was pretty cool. You told me, SpaceX, sure, you can get a ride on there, but it may be 2024, 2025.
Oh, that's
Right.
yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. So when it comes to the SpaceX, but by the way, I like SpaceX. I used to work there. I think Elon's great. And in fact, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for SpaceX that really made some changes in this industry. Now, with that said,
I use them. Yeah.
yeah. So with that said, like I said, they're building a big bus. Their timeline is 2 years to go from contract to launch. Okay. And if you have the flexibility to work with that, that's fine. But then with us, we are looking at being able to go from contract to launch within a month, and then eventually for some of the more repetitive, some of the more basic launches, there's no reason that we wouldn't be able to go from contract to launch within a week. And that's because we're trying to standardize the whole process. There's a lot of that goes into the negotiations and all these things that delay, that lengthen the whole process. And thankfully, even the FAA sees that, and they're working they're working to speed up these processes. And all of this actually happened after a launch challenge that DARPA, the defense, the research branch of the DoD, they put together. They had this DARPA launch challenge to see if companies could launch within a certain period of short time. And you know what? We were actually one of the participants of that challenge, and we were one of the 14 panelists. We made it pretty far, and that was out of like 80 plus companies, I think. So not bad. So then, so basically, even the industry itself is working towards that, and we are one of the front runners in that in that area of being able to launch more quicker.
Very interesting, Miguel. Listen, we have about 9 minutes so to go in our scheduled time, Miguel, and I wanted to discuss one additional topic before we can get some questions from the audience and maybe give you guys a last word in.
Sure.
But there's just a ton being talked about, diversity and inclusion in all types of industry, and our industry is not known for doing a particularly great job in that. So I wanted to know, Miguel, from your perspective, how important is diversity and inclusion to you in the space industry?
For me, it is very, very, very important. I like, for example, growing up, I was I was a big nerd growing up. I wanted to build rockets since I was like 7. I was actually born in a small village in the Andes Mountains of Peru at 10,000 feet up in the mountains. And then at night, you could see the entire Milky Way, like bright as day. So since like I was 7 or 6 or 7, I wanted to build rockets and spaceships to go up to the stars. And with that sort of drive and desire, I moved to the States back when I was 15 years old. I finished high school here in the States, and then I went through college and all that here in the States. And so what I noticed is that early on in my life, when I was looking for heroes, for role models, I was looking for people that I could look up to, that I could follow, and yeah, I just I couldn't find anybody that kind of resembled me or had some sort of relation to me. And then at some point, my career, I learned about astronauts of Hispanic origin. So I started following like Franklin Diaz and Jose Hernandez and Carlos Noriega from Peru and Elena Ochoa and and then by following them is how I ended up here. At some point in my life, I wanted to be an astronaut, and I took flight lessons. I got scuba certified. I learned Russian language and all of that. And so following them is how I ended up here. And I'm happy to say that now one of my childhood heroes, retired astronaut Jose Hernandez, he's on our board of advisors.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah. I
that's
saw that.
So needless to say, for me, diversity is a big deal. I think that kids look for people that look like them, and it's just easier to inspire when you have some sort of commonality.
That's fantastic. I mean, just such great insight. And Ben, hard to top that, but from your perspective as an investor.
So I was not born in a magical land, sadly I was born in Louisiana, New Orleans. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
But anyway, no, inclusion is I'll share with you guys, I'm 100% disabled from post-traumatic stress disorder from the military. So, I'm as disabled as anybody in a lot of ways. And so to meet a variety of different humans that are passionate about the same things I'm passionate about, that are working ethically toward those sort of same outcomes, it renews my faith in humanity a bit. And two, I think, again, from a business standpoint, we have enough evidence now to indicate a variety of opinions will serve you well. And I think evolution, right, as a built-in random feature, right? So I think if you don't expand your horizon, if you don't work on the diversity part or the inclusion, and outside, not token, in reality, with checks, with opportunities, with cheerleading those people that need it. I think you're just hurting your own business case, right? So
yeah.
that's how I look at it and how I've tried to treat it. And again, so Miguel, he understands what bad ecological oversight looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he knows that it's the damage that can happen, and maybe sometimes Americans are a bit removed from it. So I can appreciate that and see that in his eyes as he talks about, no, this is where, I'm making it, everybody's going to go to space. Little Peruvian kids are going to go to space. These African high school students, One Voice for Change. A lot of these young underprivileged students now programming satellites. I mean, that's wonderful. I think that's, that's pretty awesome.
Great. Listen, guys, I don't think the conversation could end on a better note. And for myself, I'm just so happy we had this time to chat. I would suggest that if anyone in the audience has further questions and would like to, reach out to do so, either to me or anyone at Seldor Capital, and hopefully directly to you guys. And I just want to thank you both for your insights, your participation, and I hope we can do this, again at some point in the near future.